a group of movers. Houston Texans. And when I see a lot of movement from one team, we've talked about it. We usually get one a week. And this time it is the Houston Texans. And it is Stefon Diggs down 5 spots. Tank Dell down 5.9 spots. Nico Collins down 1.4 spots. CJ Stroud down 8.5 spots. So CJ Stroud and his primary 3 pass catchers are all down in ADP. I get it. I have been very wary of CJ Stroud. I think one of the first videos me and Pete did together was, kind of steering people away from Stroud months ago. A lot of it is if you look at CJ Stroud last year, he's a very good NFL quarterback. So is Jared Goff. Like, some guys are just good in fantasy and very good in the NFL. And I think Stroud is going to be good in fantasy and very good in the NFL. CJ Stroud, if you look at his games last year, he only had one game where he threw more than 2 touchdown passes. He threw for 5 against Tampa. Then he threw for 3 in the playoffs. It doesn't count for us in fantasy in week 19 wildcard round. He was the quarterback 7 in points per game. He was a quarterback 11 overall. We have to factor with, and it's not just Stroud, with other quarterback finishes. Guys like Anthony Richardson, Kirk Cousins, Joe Burrow, they all missed time due to injury. If those guys are healthy, they're probably going to finish higher than guys like CJ Stroud and even Jared Goff, who flirted with a top 12 finish as well. So even though they brought in Stefon Diggs, who in theory, significant upgrade to the wide receiver room, I am still down on Stroud. Why? They brought in Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon is a significant upgrade in their backfield than their running backs last year. If we look at what Joe Mixon can do, he's an every down back. He can catch, he can block, he can do it all. He provides stability to where they can actually go through a 4-minute drill when they're in the lead and don't have to worry about giving the ball to the other team. I also expect this defense to be improved in year 2 under DeMeco Ryans. This team already last season, they were 12th in team pass plays per game. I do not see them throwing the ball more this year. I actually see them throwing the ball a little bit less, probably more of a middle of the pack team. So I'm kind of fading CJ Stroud at cost. Now, his ADP could go down to a point where, all right, I'll take my shots. But at cost right now, I do not love CJ Stroud, and I'm happy to see it going down, behind guys like Joe Burrow and Anthony Richardson. When it comes to this wide receiver room, the only one I'm remotely interested is in Nico Collins. He's the long-term wide receiver one. They paid him. Stefon Diggs, he's going to be one and done. So, if people think Diggs is going to be the wide receiver one, how do you logically tell yourself, hey, they're going to tell Nico Collins, you're going to be the 2 this year, even though you're the 1 last year. And then when we punt Diggs, when his contract runs out and we don't resign him, then you're going to go back to be the 1. That doesn't logically make sense. So I will take my shots on Nico Collins despite the injury risk. But again, Nico going down a few spots, I don't mind that either. And a lot of it's because Nico has not been able to stay healthy. He's good to miss a few games. It's almost like the James Conner of the wide receivers, where you almost pencil him in for 2 to 3 games missed. But I'm finally in agreement to the ADP movement for this skill position players in this offense outside of Joe Mixon, all trending down, because trending down, I believe, is the right direction.
Yeah. I just think it's a case of just the market correcting itself, right? Yep. Sometimes there's overreactions, right? And guys go up, guys go down. But this is a room that's been heavily inflated, right? I mean, Stefon Diggs, I don't have a single share of him. Now, don't get me wrong, if Diggs continues to drop, it's the same conversation that we talked about with Brandon Ayuk. I am ecstatic that Ayuk dropped, right? If Diggs and Dell continue to drop, yeah, I might grab some ownership in best ball of those guys. But I just wasn't okay with taking them at the cost that they were at. I was never out. I'm not necessarily even out on Stefon Diggs. It's just, I think he can have a good season. I don't think everyone seems to think he just completely dropped off and that he's not the same player that he was. I think he had a bad couple games and just wasn't himself towards the end of the year, and he left, right? But I'm okay drafting him in best ball formats or even redraft if he can continue to slide just a little bit more.
Yeah.
If he can fall back one more round, I'm okay taking a chance on him. Now, Nico Collins, I'm with Anthony, right? Like, if there's a guy to own in this room, it's Nico Collins. I love Nico Collins. I owned him in Dynasty before he popped, and that's not a pat on my back. I just always felt like, like there was a chance the talent was there, but the quarterback situation stunk, right? And honestly, my teams weren't that good in Dynasty. So I had to own all the young players that had maybe some upside, and I felt like he was one of them. But Nico Collins isn't down a ton, but I mean, you're looking at him. This is FFPC, correct, Anthony?
Yeah.
That's what we do all our rankings. So, like him being pretty much, he's actually kind of at 30.9. He's in the third round at that point. And in regular underdog, like the $3 pup, the $5, like some of these like lower stakes, like Nico's going in the middle of the second round. And I happen to love Nico Collins, but it's the same thing. If you can slide back his cost, it's an auto draft for me for Nico Collins. And it's almost an auto draft for me right now, but I am getting a little exposure to Jalen Waddle and some other guys at that cost. So yeah, I love to see that the market's finally correcting itself because guys that we love like Nico Collins, hopefully they continue to adjust because it just means we get them cheaper and maybe we can, if you're sitting at that, like if you have to team C in the 1 hole or the 2 hole, sometimes it happens, right? You can get Nico Collins possibly in the third and get one of these other high upside guys in the second round. Like that's awesome value. So yeah, that's good to see. CJ Stroud, like Anthony said, is going down. I think CJ Stroud's an extremely safe draft pick. I think he is a player that if you're swinging just safety, he's going to probably have a top 8 finish. I definitely think that's what's going to happen for him. I just don't see top 5. He's not running. He's not rushing. He's not getting points from that. And that just makes me down. Like he doesn't have the top 5 / QB1 upside. I think Kyler Murray has higher upside than CJ Stroud.
Yes.
I happen to really like Kyler Murray, and he's way cheaper than CJ Stroud. So it's nice to see that this team in general is correcting itself. And I think I could be wrong and we could touch on it next show, but I'm sure we're going to see Joe Mixon start to slide up a little bit too, and move up on the draft board a little bit, while the rest of these pass catchers and quarterbacks slide down. So that would be my prediction, but it's been a great show. I enjoy doing these on Wednesdays. I'm excited to kind of see how the market continues